Scotland's new hate crime public order comes into force today. It criminalises threatening behaviour based on age, disability, sexual orientation and transgender identity. Now, there are some very loud vocal opponents to this. J.K. Rowling, Elon Musk have been some of the most outspoken critics of the new law, saying it could stifle freedom of speech. The First Minister, Humza Yousaf, defended the law today, while others are saying it could be used to do things like sort of settle scores and make the police's job even more difficult. Let's try and understand a bit more. Joining us live is political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland, John Boothman. John, a very good afternoon to you. I've tried to sort of summarise it there, but you will do a much better job than me. What changed today in terms of how you could be criminalised for something that you say or write?
That issue, that offence of stirring up hatred has existed in Scotland for a long time in terms of racial hatred. What's happened today is that's been extended to a series of other protected characteristics: disability, religion, age, transgender identity. And the new bill also provides for harsher sentences for those convicted of crimes considered to be aggravated by prejudice. What that means is if an offender demonstrates malice or ill will towards a victim based on any of those protected characteristics, then they could get an additional sentence. Now, interestingly enough, one of the things that's annoyed women's groups in particular is that sex hatred of women is not included in this bill. There was a discussion of that. We're expecting at some time, well, in the next couple of years, the Scottish Government will pass a separate law in relation to that. But look, it's been hugely controversial, as you say. I mean, even today, the most famous woman in Scotland, known throughout the world, Joanne Rowling, J.K. Rowling's been out there really taking issue with this legislation. More particularly, she's taken issue with the whole situation regarding gender ideology. And, you know, this issue is going to prove controversial, not just for the government, but for the police in Scotland and how they enforce it.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I think people are conscious to sort of make their mark today, to say as the law changes and sort of, you know, making no jokes about the fact that it's on April Fool's Day. They're saying this isn't a joke. We want to be really clear that we don't want to have our voices silenced. Maximum penalty, actually, for this is a prison sentence of sort of up to 7 years. In terms of what you'd have to do to get a sentence like that, is that clear?
Well, that's part of the issue. There's some confusion around the whole bill. There's confusion about the way the police will enforce it. I mean, one of the reasons that it's happening today, even though the bill was passed 3 years ago in the Scottish Parliament, is it's taken the police a long time to work out how they're going to enforce this legislation. They've done some, I suppose, interesting things. They've set up 400 hate crime reporting centres, some in strange places, a sex shop in Glasgow, a salmon farm, a mushroom farm was one of the places. And people can go along, you can be anonymous, you can report what you think is a hate crime. It doesn't necessarily need to have happened to you. And the police in Scotland have promised, at the same time as they're saying they won't investigate some petty crimes in Scotland, in this case, they've promised they'll investigate every single one. Now, that's caused a problem as well because a number of people, J.K. Rowling, of course, being one of them, are basically saying that if they're going to investigate every one of these and there's vexatious complaints, of which they're expecting many, that's going to waste an awful lot of their time, their energy, and really cause difficulties for some individuals. And at the end of the day, because the tests in this, particularly that stirring up hatred test, is a legal test, the bar is so high that there might not be any prosecutions at the end of it. So really, it's quite a difficult situation, I think, in particular for the police. Some people, I think, might even feel sorry for the police. They themselves have got issues because They've instituted a programme of training inside the force about what is regarded as quite a complex piece of legislation. That training's a 2-hour online course, though they say there's other webinars that people can log into. But 6,000 of the 17,000 police officers in Scotland haven't been trained in it yet.
I think the motivation behind this was to, stop people doing things like stirring up hatred. It was designed to protect people. Clearly, the chief criticism is that maybe actually some of the execution of this means more harm will be done. Where do you sort of fall on that spectrum of whether this was the right thing to do or maybe the execution is just poor?
The logic of this seems quite interesting. Again, I listened to the First Minister today. He says that there are protections built into the new law for freedom of expression. It may be that we will get a lot of complaints initially. That may die down and there won't be that many prosecutions. However, it's, as I say, right, I think this is going to cause an awful lot of problems, particularly in a situation where certainly in Scotland, the police say they've got 1,000 fewer officers than they've had in the past, that this whole bill and its execution and enforcement hasn't been given any extra resources for the police to actually enforce it. So yes, I think there's going to be a number of problems with this.
Clearly. John Boothman from the Sunday Times in Scotland, thank you so much for explaining it day one as that legislation comes into force in Scotland.